Awesome, awesome. So I'm going to ask the panelists to first introduce themselves, because I think you know why we're here, to talk about the lack of diversity and the lack of diverse suppliers and owned businesses in the ad tech space. I hope that's why you're here. I hope. But I'm going to ask each of them to give no more than 90 seconds. Is that good?
It's plenty.
To talk about themselves and what they do and why they're passionate about being here with you all at Black Week.
So Charles Cantu, CEO and founder of Reset Digital, also I think the first founder of a black ad tech company when we built out Huddled Masses and Colossus in 2012, I think it were. But we are a DSP, an SSP, an ad server, and now we're into media. We've been touching on media and building out the CMS for a couple of platforms that we're excited to talk about.
Good afternoon, everyone. Eric Austin, Vice President of Global Marketing and Media Innovation at P&G. And my role is to see the future, actually build capabilities for the brands that we have in our portfolio. We've got about 65 brands. I sit in a central organization that look after a lot of our global capabilities, look for opportunities to build reach, effectiveness, and efficiency for our brands, but at the same time, look for ways to drive inclusion throughout the media and creative supply chain because it's essential for our future business growth.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Aliab Deng, and I'm the commercial advisor to the CRO at TripleLift. And in that role, I help with any type of revenue strategies that we're working on, and one that's important to us is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I am also the founder and chair of the Women in Programmatic Network in the US.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask the panelists to really start us quickly, because one of the things we talked about was not spending as much time on the problem, but wanting to talk about solutions, right, to diversifying this space. And so whoever wants to answer first, to talk about the barriers, why we still have this monopoly. This doesn't feel like a new problem. It feels like almost Groundhog's Day. In a way, it's an old problem. And so, to quickly summarize, in your opinion, what are the barriers to entry for diverse-owned companies?
Wow, that's a big one. I think there have been a lot of things, mainly because advertising in general was a good old boys network to begin with, right? So blacks, Hispanics, Asians, women were not really invited to the party early days, and that trickled through Ivy League and what that is and what ad tech became out of Silicon Valley and Harvard and Princeton and so on and so forth. So that's institutional. And so those are the barriers that we kind of started with. And the other piece to that equation, which I think, hats off to Joseph Anthony and the Hero Collective team for putting all this stuff together, because the funding and the financing, and hats off to P&G for all they've been doing and putting money behind all of these things, seeing that financial problem and tying that to creators and engineers and people like myself, those have been, from my experience, the problems.
I'll go to Rebecca and then come back up. Eric.
Yeah, so TripleLift actually commissioned a State of D&I report to ask that specific question: what are the issues that people are seeing in the industry? And 100 publishers who own diverse platforms essentially said that their issue is education and access. So understanding how to be programmatically available, how to help provide scale, that's something that they just don't know from a tech perspective. So there is the piece of general what we've seen systemically, but there's also the lower level issue of just access and education to being available programmatically.
And Eric, you represent big P&G. Y'all aren't small, 100,000 plus. Your ad spend is amazing. What have been the barriers? I know you all have helped people break that glass ceiling. So what do you see as the barriers?
Great question. I think depending on the area you're coming in on, if we're talking ad tech and programmatic, one of the things I've seen that's not accelerating the growth here, a couple things. One, I would say just the technical infrastructure that publishers, diverse-owned publishers may have. I think the fragmentation in the ecosystem is vast. There's hundreds of thousands of publishers out there, right? And how does a brand shift through that layer of complexity? Programmatic helps with that, but you gotta have the tech infrastructure in your sites and your publishers to be able to connect in programmatically. The last thing, and I chalk this up to more of a pipeline issue in talent. When I started on this journey probably about 7, 8 years ago, just in this particular role, one of the things that got me inspired in ad tech and programmatic was I didn't see people on stage or in the industry that looked like me, okay? I think we're starting to get there, but we gotta have more pipeline of talent coming out of our colleges and universities that has the skill set for the future, right? So, I mean, all the tech companies are having this problem, you know, Google and Facebook and Meta and Amazon. If you look in their numbers are low when it comes to having particularly black people that are in key positions in this space. So I think it's a tech issue, it's a fragmentation issue, it's a pipeline issue.
As the talent acquisition person here, I'm going to deviate a little bit and ask, as we have folks here who are interested in careers in this space, what skills do we need to be developing to make us competitive, whether it's wanting to be a founder like you, Charles, or even to just get into a Google or a Facebook? What are the skills people need to have?
Wow. I think, you know, for me personally, it's being able to, someone coming to an event like this, walking up to someone like me, being open to true apprenticeship, not necessarily mentorship, but actual apprenticeship. If you want to be an entrepreneur, I didn't get here on my own. I worked under many brilliant CEOs, vice presidents, directors, sales managers, et cetera. So being in the game long enough to understand the multiple facets of the business in the first place, and understanding, while we appreciate your authentic self, that this is a corporate gig, and when you're in front of corporations, you have to be able to represent you know, your best church self and how you would act in front of your mom and grandmom, as opposed to just being out there. Because, you know, I made those same mistakes, right? And I had, you know, bosses tell me, you know, you can't dress like that here, you can't talk like that here, and it took years to get there, but ultimately, you know, that's the journey.
I love it, that we do want you to bring your authentic self and the goodness and the eyes that you bring because of the culture, but they're still their culture, so you got to understand what you're walking into. Rebecca, what skills do you think folks wanting to break in need?
I think it's definitely important to, as Charles said, to network, but I also think there's something to be said for asking for what you want and putting yourself out there. So the current role that I have at TripleLift didn't exist previously. I worked closely with our CRO on other projects and decided that this is the job that I wanted, to work with him more closely, to be something akin to his chief of staff. And I networked with people who did that role. I wrote a job description, and then I pitched it to him. And he said no. And then 3 months later, he said, I now have the money. I'm glad that you asked for this opportunity. Let's do it. So definitely putting yourself out there and asking for what you want is the key to be able to have opportunity.
And I love that as a woman of color. Women tend not to ask for what they want, and then women of color, we definitely tend not to ask. So power to you. Didn't I tell you you were my She-Ra? You didn't even know? That's it. I want to talk a little bit about the large corporations and brands and how you all are partnering, right? We have some smaller companies. P&G is this monolith. It's huge. How are you incentivized to work with these diverse-owned ad tech platforms and companies, and how are you all working together with what you can share, right? I know you can't share everything.
Well, I mean, I think it's a commitment internally to work with diverse-owned and operated companies. You got to have, I don't have to go back, it's an access issue. You got to have the right people seat at the table. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for people that believed in me, but it's important to have people of color in positions to be able to even want to invest in diverse owned and operated ad tech or publishers and creators, et cetera. Would we be here today, and I'm just going to be very transparent, if we didn't have a Damon Jones, a Leela Coffey, a Charlotte Lanier, or Cedric, or myself, who are sitting in critical positions that is orchestrating the spin of such a large investment that P&G have in creative and media. So I think it's a representation issue that unlocks at least getting the start of those partnerships. And with that, I think there's a commitment to making sure that we have budgets set aside to grow the market, to build the ecosystem. You know, one of the things that we did a few years back in 2021, post George Floyd, we kicked off an initiative called Widen the Screen. And the intent of that was to make sure that we widen the perspective of Black life. So that means accurate portrayal of all the content that we create, not only with P&G ads, but even beyond. Create the partnerships that are needed to grow the market. At the time, we didn't have a partnership with a lot of Black owned and operated. We had a core few. Of course, BET was there, and you know, you had a few others. But there's so many partners that you can work with nowadays that are out there, and you need to connect with them to grow the market. The third thing I would say is the inventory. When we looked at the problem and said, hey, we want to invest, particularly in media and programmatic and ad tech, even if we could have got the dollars, it just wasn't enough, particularly in programmatic, and it wasn't enough inventory out there to accept the dollars, right? So we had to go on a journey to actually get a lot of people connected in to the ecosystem, and that ecosystem creates the growth. Over the past year, I think we've added probably 60 new diverse-owned partners into our programmatic ecosystem. And that's super important because programmatic is one of our largest spend pools. I'm not here to tout our numbers, but if this is one of our largest spend pools, that's a pretty sizable amount. And this space is growing at double digits. And if you're not connected in, given where automation is going, our full philosophy is a good majority of media, if not all, will be some form decisioned or programmatic probably within the next 10 years. So either you can stand back and transact off-hand sold deals, which we do small of that, or you can get on the growth train and get into this ad tech ecosystem where the dollars are and figure that out.
And I'll dovetail that with a couple of points. My experience with P&G has been, and with a few other companies, it's not just having your champions like Eric and Charlotte and Leela and Cedric and Mark Pritchard. They have to be gladiators to do this work, right? Because we've been at this for 4 or 5 years now, and the systemic issues within ad tech, meaning in some ways maybe even technical racism versus systemic racism, that doesn't go away overnight. So what this man who's being very humble and modest is not saying is the number of meetings that he had to sit down with, his programmatic partner, where they put all their spend into, and really just hammer them on why are you not? What's the problem? And the truth is, we don't always know if it's technical, right? Because they change the goals sometimes on people, or if it's just something that they really don't want to do because of business operations. But they have to be gladiators beyond just being a champion. The other thing that's critically important, and the relationship that we have with Triple Lift here at Reset, is you don't always see Black companies working together, right? You see, I want to be the number one, and again, hats off to Joseph Anthony for bringing all of us all together like this, because the truth is, while he may get something out of this, at the end of the day, everybody is getting something out of this, and this is a this is a critical moment, but that was the relationship with Triple Lift and Reset as well earlier the year to say, okay, two black companies giving you the largest diverse marketplace in the world, trillions of impressions, like, don't talk to me about scale issues. It's not real. It's probably your partner if you have that at this point. So that's what we're bringing to the table. And then the partnership with LiveRamp, which, you know, we haven't even announced yet, but like that's a big deal too.
Yeah, so in terms of the partnership that Charles mentioned, TripleLift as an SSP, we've plugged into Reset Digital as a DSP, so it's a straight line of diverse-owned companies there. But in terms of some other initiatives that we've done, getting specifically to what you mentioned, Eric, about being programmatically available, we partnered with Dentsu to be a sponsor of BOMISI, which is the Black-Owned Media Equity and Sustainability Initiative, as a sponsor. And we sponsored a cohort earlier this year, and we've provided the opportunity, like beyond just the cash prize, right? The ability for people to attend different webinars, and then from there, have TripleLift SMEs explain, what does it mean to be programmatically available? What does it mean to be, you know, compliant? What is privacy and identity to you? And actually taking these publishers to monetization partners and saying to them, these are the people who we work with. These people can help you monetize your supply. And then from there, we can plug into them, we can amplify them, provide scale, and then you could potentially be logging into your Reset Digital platform ID and have a complete diverse owned chain. But that final piece of making sure that people are programmatically available and providing that scale, that's the actual work to making it happen.
Shout out to Ronisha Devon at BOMISI, you know what I'm saying? So, oh, there she is.
If you didn't catch the underlying message, they all three said lifting as they climb, right? They said it's hard work. We're going to keep pushing on these doors of DEIB to make sure we're seen. And then the education piece, that there's enough pie. I heard there really is a big piece of pie. We just have to be ready to share it, right? To make sure that we see diverse-owned companies getting their piece of the pie. So I love that. I want to flip the question a bit around, what do you see in this space that diverse-owned companies are uniquely positioned to deliver that others aren't? I think one of the things, as I looked at all the signage here, we do things for the culture. There's just a way that we, black and brown and diverse folks, do things, and we bring insights. What are we positioned uniquely to disrupt in this space?
What we saw, so one of my partners, Jean-Marc, who couldn't be with us today, was saying in DC last week with all of the black broadcasters across America, TV and radio, was performance. Like, we outperform our people, our group, everybody in here, outperform head-to-head any DSP, any SSP, you know, bar none, sometimes by, you know, double digits, triple digits. It's insane the numbers of performance that we deliver. And I think that has to do with our buying power. I think that has to do with the fact that when we see us represented the right way and it's spoken the right language like P&G does with their creative, like it's intimate, right? Intimacy, into me you see, and we feel that and we respond to that. But it works also in Hispanic and Asian and other stuff that we've seen. So the performance is there. And I'm not sure that the other non-diverse tech companies are actually speaking to that population.
Well, I think in the instances where they're speaking, they might not be speaking that well in a way that doesn't resonate. And I think even there's an element of being here at Black Week, like the elevator doors opened and I was like, there's so many black people here, like this feels like home. And I think that there's an opportunity when you advertise to do the same thing. And I also think it's important that what you mentioned, Charles, about the performance is also clear, because I think that sometimes marketers aren't necessarily seeing, you know, black-owned media, diverse-owned media as necessarily being performant, and that's something that has to change, right? It's not just talking to an audience, it's actually converting them, it's actually working.
Where's it going, Eric? What are y'all disrupting? Uh-oh, I know all the P&G language, wide moat, NDA, don't get me.
Yeah, and actually disruptor is a key word. You know, one of our strategies, and this is beyond ad tech, is just constructive disruption. And we have to have that constructive disruption mindset to enable the growth. You know, we have a number of big billion-dollar brands in the portfolio, and it's tough to move the needle on growth for Tide, right? Big brand, huge, you know, reach potential, and we have a number of those brands. So, you know, disrupting is key to extract the growth that we need. So we have to think through and not be satisfied with the status quo in many things, right? So, you know, whether it's our portfolio, you know, are we going to continue down the path and, you know, and look ourselves in the mirror? Do we have the right product portfolio to delight, you know, Black, Hispanic consumers? That set us out to go acquire Bevel, that set us out to go acquire Mael, and many other native and many other brands that are out there that speak to that audience so that we can better serve those consumers. It speaks to disruption in terms of investment, right? You know, post George Floyd, there was a big push. Like, why is less than 2% of, you know, U.S. ad spend on Black media? Now, I think we made a little progress since then, but it's going to require disruptive strategies and, you know, programs, events like this to actually move the needle on media investment. We need disruption in amount of inventory that's out in the ecosystem that our brands can be in and around, right? So, you know, post George Floyd, everybody was like, hey, spend with us, spend with us. And we're like, we want to, but do you have enough inventory to actually move the needle in some of the growth? So again, that goes back into investment where we're putting a lot of money into content development and positioning it in that way that our brands can be in and around that content to grow the market that we need there. So I think it's disruption across the board. You know, it's our mindset and how we grow our brands.
We've continued to reference that critical 2020 George Floyd kind of inflection point. And for those of us in the DIB space, we're starting to see a lot of pullback. How are you all making sure that people still care, right? And that they still are focusing on diverse consumers, diverse-owned companies. Like, you talked about people being gladiators, right? But being a gladiator is hard work, right? When you're continuing to push that boulder up a hill, how do we make sure that this platform, this message, this work still is important to companies, and not just diverse-owned companies, right? The others have to care as well.
So a few things. One, the good news is that at least at Reset, we're still experiencing triple-digit growth, like year over year over year. So it's commitments like P&G. We're going to spend this much, and then we're going to double it. And we're going to continue to double it. So the gladiators are there. It's not going away. I think the other good news is that folks that were, you know, fronting and white labeling other people's tech and media even, those middlemen, that's starting to fall to the wayside. So brands and agencies are starting to say, well, why am I getting middled? Like, why are we doing these things? And that's creating more jobs and more growth. So I think, you know, we said it early and we said it throughout. This is a journey. It's a marathon. It doesn't end. Like, you know, the pursuit of excellence is real, right? And so with that triple-digit growth, I'm sure Bomisi's seeing the same thing. Like, now that the real winners are in, you know, the front run, now we can just continue to collaborate and grow the whole thing. And, you know, there's some things we can't talk about and we haven't announced yet, but those investments are being matched with technology. And so we're going to see we're excited about 2025 and what we're going to be announcing there.
2025, we're waiting.
Yeah, I would just say that regardless of what is happening in the macro, that individually companies need to just take their own stand and be consistent. So at Triple Lift, we have our D&I offering, our different packages, context on what we do in our general pitch. And when we're going out to meet customers, to meet prospects, that's what we pitch every time. So regardless of where people are necessarily thinking about investing, what's going on. We're saying we have this inventory, it's performant, it's a core part of what we provide, it's what we bring to the table with every pitch, and eventually someone will buy it.
And when they do, back to that performant part, like I just had a conversation with Taco Bell earlier today. That performance, I just can't stress that enough. When you double what someone else can do, when you quintuple what someone else can do, it's not about black anymore. It's about green. And people make their next job and their promotion and their board because the money is rolling. It's what it is.
Now that is real talk. It no longer is black or brown, it is green. And sometimes when I do some coaching, I have to remind folks that while you may have a great idea and you want to push it, these companies are in business to make money. So when you are pushing and pitching, you have to make sure there's that win-win, and it is about the money. We want to do good social impactful things, but we are all here to make money for our companies because we like nice things. I have about 3 minutes. I think I see the sign before we'll take questions from you. I'd love for you all to kind of talk about public and private. You know, what initiatives are you seeing kind of at a macro, bigger than your companies, that are helping things move forward?
So some of the Fortune 1000 companies that we're working with, we're seeing them, to Eric's point, they're investing more in what I guess P&G would call growing the pie, right? So it's not just about spending the money, it's about increasing the overall black marketplace, increasing the overall Hispanic marketplace. And that's becoming more and more real every day. I'm seeing that throughout the Fortune 1000. So that should be incredibly exciting to everybody in the room.
Yeah, I think the trend here, and the big macro trend, at least for us, and that's part of our messaging that we're delivering, is about market growth. Okay, so I think we're in a unique position where it's imperative for advertisers to grow with diverse consumers, multicultural consumers. DEI is under attack, right? And we can't approach it for DEI's sake. You approach it from a growth mindset. And when we first started on this journey, we had force for good and force for growth. We intentionally flipped it, and it's a force for growth so that we can be a force for good, okay? The growth has to be there. And the mindset of growing markets, when you grow markets, everybody eats. So you'll see all of us be on stages. We're not into stealing share from one brand to another, but it's about growing markets. And what we hear from our retailers, when our brands go to a Target or a Walmart or a Costco, they're not less interested in what a brand can do. They're interested in what are you doing to grow the category. Because when the category grows, all boats rise with that. So in thinking in that mindset, even from a consumer perspective, the population growth in the U.S., nearly 100% of the growth coming in the U.S. is coming from multiculturals, right? 50% of our sales growth is coming from multiculturals. So, and our brands have an opportunity to go close the share gaps with African American, Hispanics, APA, LGBTQ. When you add all that up over the course of 10 years, it's a $10 billion opportunity, right? 8 billion of that is market growth. Let me go back and say that. That $10 billion opportunity just to go win with these multicultural segment is a $10 billion opportunity, and 80% of that is market growth. Not necessarily share on our brands, but market. So I think the big macro trends to your question is around where we're at from a multicultural consumer perspective. We are the growth engine, right? So I think that's the position for marketers, but even for agencies and creators. Position yourself as a growth engine, and for us, it not only grows our brands and categories, but it creates economic spending power. When I invest in a diverse-owned agency or creator, that gives them spending power in the marketplace to purchase our brands, right? So it's full circle. We have a lot of premium brands in each of the categories in which we compete. They're pretty pricey brands, right? And you need that spending power to go get those brands. To purchase those brands.
Yeah, I would say similarly what we're doing at Triple Lift with our partnerships with Bomisi or with Reset are similar. People can log into Reset and not choose to run on Triple Lift, or we can introduce a publisher to a monetizing partner and they might not work with us long term, but we are creating an opportunity for more programmatic inventory to exist in the ecosystem full stop, whether or not someone chooses to run with us. So in the same way, it is the concept of how do we grow the market?
How we grow markets.
We're growing markets. We have time for one question. Come on up. I can't really see.
Thank you. The black media spend is about 2% of all spend right now, and part of that barrier to entry is brand suitability, brand safety, and how verification vendors view black-owned media. Would you say there is an opportunity for the Double Verifies IAS to have a multicultural division, or an opportunity for us to build out a company like that to change how we're viewed?
Personally, I think there's probably both. So, and that problem doesn't exist in the Reset DSP. I inked the first article in, I think it was Adweek or Ad Age, about that specific issue. So we tackled that, but the reality is it still exists in other platforms. The problem with ad verification generally is it's based on lists, and those lists don't get updated, and I think everybody probably here knows how that all works. So it's a lot of diligence involved in that, but yeah, it certainly is a big opportunity. We rolled out our self-service in our DSP recently, and we are looking at all solutions for brand safety for the major 5 agencies and the Fortune 1000. So if you got something, let's talk.
Come on up. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for sharing your views. As it was mentioned that in 2024, that 90% of digital media investment will be programmatically. So my question was, how can the industry create a pipeline of diverse tech talent that is prepared to lead and innovate within programmatic advertising? So means, what are the initiatives right now taking up? Because this is a new space which is growing a lot, and so how you're trying to create a pool of talents who are ready to be.
Yeah, you may want to come up a little bit so I can hear, because there's an echo and I cannot hear the question. Sorry.
Yeah, hello. I'm saying that around 90% of digital media investment is spent on through programmatically, and so now how you're planning to the industry is planning to create a pipeline of diverse tech talent that is prepared to lead and innovate within programmatic industry. So because it's a new industry growing a lot in rapid space, and so how to keep up with the talent so in that in this space, so people can come and work in this space.
I think what I heard the question, let me repeat it, is how do you build the pipeline of talent in this space? Okay. Now, it's a great question. And I think you got to definitely work it with the right skill sets that is being taught in these universities, right? And there also has to be the right hiring. And it's a great question because we looked at it throughout the supply chain here. There's not enough students in this space right now. There's not enough the numbers of diverse in the hiring. So we even had to get back and expand our recruiting tactics to get more diverse brand builders in the pipeline. And then once you get that, you gotta have support systems to get them through their careers at critical levels to be able to even invest in this. So it is not an easy play, but you have to go all the way back in the pipeline. So I came out of school with a computer engineering degree and then turned to be a brand builder in marketing. But yet again, there has to be advocacy and support to put the people at the right levels to make the right decisions to invest in these platforms or understand as well.
And I would say P&G is a special place because I was there as a material scientist and engineer, and they turned me into an HR person. So they just make you whatever, but I think companies have to be willing to look past the degrees and look at skills. And I know there's a big wave around talking about skills-based hiring and skills, and I think I would encourage folks to be thinking about how you think about the skills you have to help people understand, because they don't understand. Hiring is not a science, it is more artsy, and a lot of hiring managers actually don't know what they're doing. I said that out loud. And I mean it. So really helping them understand what you bring to the table and the skills, right? Because not every company has that machine that will take a computer engineer and spit them out and say, you could be a VP of marketing, or you could be a this. And so, again, you advocating for yourself, I think going full circle, Rebecca talked about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I got my degree in ancient Greek and Latin. This is like not taught in schools, but I was recruited. So that's how you get here. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I saw that our time is up.
Got one more question.
One more question. Can we Eric said we can take it, so ain't nobody finna throw us off the stage.
I saw him waving his hand. So.
Listen, they not finna throw us off the stage.
Great panel, guys.
Thank you.
I'm an ad tech genie, and this is directed to Eric. If I could solve something for you in the future, what would that be?
If you could what?
Solve a pain point for you right now, but build something that would solve it for the future, what would that be? Because I've heard a lot of different things.
Pain point. Oh, there's many of them, but one. I think that if there was a broad-based effort to get a lot of the publishers and programs some tech fund available to get everybody connected. Because Charles can probably speak to the time and effort that it takes to connect in programmatically. It's not easy, right? But once you're plugged in, it's very lucrative. But just that hurdle to make sure all the handshakes and the tech is there, and then having the inventory available for our brands to go access all the consumers is a monumental challenge. So that integration, that lift, that integrates a lot of these publishers at scale and get them connected in would make life easier for marketers.
And with that, join me in thanking Eric, Charles, and Rebecca. We did it. We're done. Thank you. And thank yourselves for all your time and engagement.